And with no further ado, I'm so excited to welcome my dear friend and colleague, fellow researcher and pioneer in the biofield healing space, Eileen McKusick, with us today for our December webinar. Welcome, Eileen. For those of you who don't know Eileen, I imagine most of you do. She is the author of two best-selling books, one called Tuning the Human Biofield, and the other, Eileen, remind me the name.
Electric Body, Electric Health.
Electric Body, Electric Health, your second book, which was really taking some of the wisdom from your tradition, which we're going to be talking about, biofield tuning, a sound healing approach that you've developed and that we have had the privilege of working with you on in a really dynamite research study. I'm so excited for us to talk about that. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, Shamini, thank you. You know, it's funny how this worked out. Somebody saying my audio is weak. Is it still, yes, there is an echo, and I'm sorry, there's really not a lot I can do about that. I'm in Jamaica. The internet died in my neighborhood, and I'm in the hotel across the street in the conference room. It's empty and it's echoey, but I'm here. So please bear with me. And I'm going to do a tuning which might sound a little weird, and that kind of echoiness might even be a little off-putting. But I just invite you to adjust your volume to a way that works for you, and remember that it's about the energy. So let me just turn up a little bit.
Yeah, we have a little bit of an echo, but it's, I'm sure, nothing that we can't handle, Eileen. And thank
Okay.
you for making it happen in, in kind of a very unpredictable environment to join us live. It is an absolute treat to be with you live, and what a treat that we're going to receive a tuning. And so
Yeah.
maybe before we do that, for those who are unfamiliar with the work of biofield tuning, can you help us understand what it is that you do, how you work with the biofield with sound, and what you've been discovering over these decades of work that you've been doing with biofield tuning?
Well, I think the thing that I like to boil things down to their simplest essence. And what I've really come to see, especially over the last few months, is that most of what ails us is tension based. And if you think about something like anxiety, which we studied, I mean, there's a lot of tension in anxiety, right? Depression, there's a kind of heavy tension in depression. Even physical ailments, like most of the things, and I keep asking people, I'm like, tell me some kind of ailment that's not tension based. Even addictions are really, when you think about it, an attempt to relax, whether it's 6 beers or the whatever it is, right? Carbs, overwork, we're just trying to relax. And so what biofield tuning does is it helps the body to relax deeply held tension, subconscious tension, tension that's there from traumas you had a long time ago. You might even be carrying trauma, tension from your birth trauma, and you don't even know it. So it's really it's a way of using tuning fork sound. We bounce it off the body. We use sound around the body and on the body to give the body feedback about its state of tension. And when the body gets this feedback, it goes, oh, wow, why am I doing that? Because the tuning fork produces a steady, coherent input. It entrains the body's electrical system, all the vibes and the energy running through us all the time, our emotions, our thoughts, into a more steady, coherent state. And it helps us to learn to self-regulate better, essentially. And so that's, Shamini was showing me the slides she's going to show, and we were looking at some of the comments of the people from that study, right? And one of those went by. I was like, I'm just self-regulating better. And a lot of the inputs, a lot of the inner currents that we have, we inherited. We either inherited from our parents, or we got it through childhood trauma, or it's part of the ambient matrix, which is really kind of a mess at the moment. I don't know if anybody's been feeling it, but the last few days, everything's scrambled. And animals apparently are going around in circles. I don't know if anybody's seen any of those videos. But it's a tough environment to navigate at the moment. And we really need everything we can do, right, to help to stabilize us, to ground us, to calm us down. And so that's what the tuning I'm going to do today is, just so that you can get a taste of like, okay, we treated these people for anxiety through Zoom with tuning forks. Like, how does that even work? Like, how is that even possible, right? So we're just going to answer that question by letting you have that experience to start.
Beautiful, Eileen. I look forward to it because I think what you're kind of reminding us of is that this is about coming into coherence, right? So the tension sort of moves us out of coherence sometimes. And when we identify so much with that, we forget about our inner coherence. And your method allows us to come back into deeper coherence with our true nature.
Yeah, with our true nature, which is playful. And that's really what I found in all the years that I've been working on people. What I find is that as we release this tension, we become more fluid, we become more free, we become more playful, we become more spontaneous, we become more of who we are. We expand into our full potential. That is what is stopping you from reaching your potential. Everybody knows that they have all this potential, and it can be very frustrating to not be able to achieve it. Somebody recently said, I feel like I'm living in a 50-room house and I'm only staying in one room. I was like, well, you need to expand out right into the whole being. Well, what's stopping you is tension. And the more you can release that tension, the more you expand into your potential. It's 360 degrees in every direction. It's not just up.
Oh, I love it. What a beautiful example. Well, I know that I probably speak for everyone that I am super excited for you to share with us what this feels like, especially here as we're so privileged and blessed to come together live in this group and experience a sound healing that will be amplified, no doubt, through this field of, beautiful healing souls that are all together at the moment.
Yeah,
Hundreds of us at this point,
hundreds of us.
live.
Yay.
It's really
Thanks,
wonderful.
everybody, for showing up. All right, well, do we want me to get started, Shamini, or do we feel like we're good to go?
Yeah, let's get started. Sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. Okay, so what I noticed when I opened up my toolkit today was that I was missing my primary fork that I usually use to work. I usually use 174 hertz. Somehow it escaped from my toolkit. So I'm going to use a fork that can be a little disruptive. This fork is 144 hertz, but it's like invisible in Zoom. There it is. I have my background blurred. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate it against a hockey puck. There we go. So, because sometimes people are like, what's she hitting it on? So just so you know what's happening here. So this frequency can be disruptive. It can be jarring, especially in this echoey room. Okay, but please don't run away. Just hang tight with it and be curious. Right? This is not about being beautiful or some kind of bowl thing where it's relaxing. Like, it might sound really wonky, and that's okay, because this is just how the process works. So your job on the receiving end, and we're going to go for about 10, maybe 15 minutes or so, is to be curious and to also monitor your breath. So you want to make sure you're not holding your breath, because a big part of this whole relaxing tension thing is really about liberating the breath. So many people hold their breath or don't breathe fully and deeply, and it's really through control of our breath that we self-regulate. So I want you to just be really aware of your breathing. And when you feel like you might need to take a big breath, breathe into the belly and use your imagination and your intention to exhale down into the ground. So breathing into the belly, exhaling down into the ground. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tune in to the collective field of everyone who will ever watch this recording. So if you're not live, you are here in this group that we're going to tune into. And I'm just going to listen. I'm going to listen to, basically, I just imagine that it's here, I stick a fork in it, and then I listen to the quality of energy that's present. Just as if I was working with a person, it's the same thing, except that I'm listening to multiple data sets. But they all kind of form one big data set, and the strong currents come through that are kind of present in a lot of participants, okay? So start just by closing your eyes and taking a moment to just do a scan of your inner space. How are you feeling? Do you have tension anywhere that you're aware of? Do you have pain anywhere? Just taking a baseline assessment. Okay, and then I'm going to activate the fork and I'm just going to listen. And we'll go from there. Okay, so what I'm hearing in the strike is kind of like a rigidity, a kind of rigidity with a little bit of fear on top. There was a little bit of numbness, a little bit of stiffness, a little bit of fear. It was kind of like it doesn't feel spacious and open and ringing and clear. It just is like, blah, blah. So we're just gonna keep listening. Now what's cool is that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to intend anything. I don't even really either. We're just going to keep on listening, and I'll keep on kind of weighing in on how the sound is changing. So the sound is interacting with your body's organizing intelligence, the part of you that's governing health and healing and well-being. That is the part of you, the part that heals a cut that you don't even have to pay attention to, that's working with the sound. So the conscious mind just gets to watch what is taking place. You don't have to try anything other than just being present with curiosity. And sound wants to open up space in the body. It wants to get inside you and to start kind of wiggling open those places that are tightly knit. And so see if you can feel the sound finding its way in. Maybe noticing tension in the throat or tension in other parts of your body. Maybe things are getting a little worse or more uncomfortable to start, and that's okay. And you might find a big breath wanting to spontaneously arise at some point. Just follow that breath if it does that. And you might, as you start to relax, you might feel emotions start to come up. And part of what keeps us in tension is the suppression of emotions that we've labeled as bad or unacceptable, that we might be holding in and holding back. And as that tension starts to let go, the emotion begins to surface. So just be curious about that if that's happening. And if your body at any point wants to start to move, like mine does, I can't really help it, then follow that. Be curious about that movement. Does it want to wiggle or shake or stretch or expand in some way? Right? That's space opening up. Or do you need to make a sound? Some kind of sound that wants to come out of you. And don't be afraid to be like a kid, with your curiosity about how the sound wants to move you. As it starts to get inside and rattle around, how does it want to move your body? It's a whole layer of fear coming up in there. Fear around expression, fear around movement, fear around being seen, fear around taking up space, fear of being wrong. Lots of things that get in the way, right? We go through school, there's so much of like, you're wrong, or you need to sit down and be quiet, and there's a lot of clamping down on ourselves. And so as we start to move and expand and open, that feeling of clamping down and being afraid can just kick right back in again, reflexively. Yep, yawning might happen, eyes watering. Yeah, that's normal. And I would invite you to explore just making any kind of sound that might want to come out. Very often the head and the neck and the jaw and the mouth is where the sound goes through the shoulders. So much of our clamping down and holding in is in the throat and the shoulders. Well, you might also be feeling it in the belly or the gut. Everybody experiences their tension differently. There's also coming through a kind of feeling of overwhelm. I think that this is something that's kind of a theme in the collective at the moment, is just everything's just sort of overwhelming. Life is kind of hard, you know. It's like, oh, a meteor is going to hit the earth tomorrow. Thank God, kind of feeling, right? Just be done with this mess. So I think that, you know, and the more things become overwhelming, and we feel pressure, we get tense, and there's a whole cycle there, right? So part of being expanded and open and full breath is that you can get on top of these things, that the life isn't crushing you under the wheel, but that you're on top of it and able to manage. Like, we signed up for this, guys. We're here. You know, you can handle it. You can deal. You can. Okay, so that's setting in a wiggle in me. And, you know, this is animals when they're releasing tension or trauma, what do? They shake, right? They have some kind of kerfluffle and then they shake it off. So, you know, I've just been working with sound for a long time. The same way when music starts playing, I'm like, I just can't stop dancing because my body is so free from having all the sound go in and open it up, right? Sound moves us. Music moves us. How does it work over Zoom? Sound moves us, even if it's a recording, even if you weren't there when it was recorded. That's how it works. All right, I'm going to shut up for a couple minutes here. Okay, I'm going to switch forks. That was 144 hertz. I'm going to switch to 528 hertz fork right now. Just let this one be curious about how this one wants to move in your body, what wants to happen. I want to turn into Stevie Wonder, clearly, when I hear this work. And even if you're feeling like the smallest inclination to move or stretch, I want you to really open that up. Just follow that. It's really, we're all stuck in patterns of thought, of feeling, of self. And the way that we change our life in our experience of ourself is by switching up these patterns of tension, releasing the patterns of tension, opening up new space inside of us, starting to tell a different story. This is what the forks do, is they break down these old patterns of tension, liberate energy to flow in a more central, balanced kind of way. Help to get our biofields out of bunches and into flow states. Good, okay. So we're just gonna do a few more with this one. So take a nice big breath for me into the belly and exhale down into the ground. Okay, and I want you to take another big breath, and on this next breath, I want you to really fill up your lungs like as much as you possibly can. So from the belly, but then expanding up the top of the lungs, the back of the lungs, the back of the upper chest. Just really take in a really big breath. And exhale it with some sound down into the ground. That's it. Yeah, good. Good. Okay, so one more gentle breath. Open your eyes if you've had them closed. Just kind of come back into this moment. And then do another little scan. Just kind of check in with your body. It's just a little taste, right? But just see what you notice. Do you feel a little, do you feel any different? Do you feel like your state changed in any way? Shamini, what are you noticing?
I love it. I laughed when you said this particular fork brings you to a Stevie Wonder place because I wanted to, my energy was doing that, you know. It's really lovely. Thank you so much. And I'm sure there's lots of gratitude people are feeling for that experience and just the taste of it. I know there are many tuners that are joining us right now, so some of you already have an experience of this, both receiving and giving tuning. It never ceases to amaze me, Eileen, every time you work together. First of all, how wonderful it is to experience it and to literally feel the sound moving the energy in and around the body, you know, and literally feeling the freedom that occurs and sort of the expansion of the field with the expansion of the breath that happens with this, you know. And let's face it, as you know, I joke around about being a recovering academic because if I were to take this and take it to some of my colleagues in sort of the more mainstream academic circles, they'd be like, interesting, you know. And then I would tell them about our study, and there would be, I'm sure, many questions. And I'm really excited about this. As you know, you and I have known each other now for years. And Eileen, I remember when we first met and you came to me and we were chatting and you expressed how interested you were in doing research generally with the biofield, how you came to even explore that term as you were writing your master's thesis, trying to understand and articulate what it was that you were experiencing already with your clients and yourself. And your enthusiasm, as so many of our wonderful healing practitioners who are part of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, for conducting collaborative research and your enthusiasm for doing so. As you know, not everyone is super enthused for research. Some people don't feel like it's necessary, don't care. Of course, they'll say, we're not trying to prove anything. We don't need to prove energy exists. We know that. And yet you and I think, and many share a common interest and passion, first for just being curious explorers, and also for understanding how can this help mitigate some of the suffering that we're seeing out in the world, because these are very non-toxic, holistic solutions that bring us back to our true nature and can help to mitigate some of this tension and suffering that we're seeing out in the world. And so I'm really, you know, thrilled that we are working together in this regard. But anything that you want to share about the research journey as we've been doing work together now, and I know you've been doing work in research for a few years now.
Yeah, so I came out of my master's in education degree, in my master's thesis, determined to go get a PhD. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a device that would visualize the biofield, because my tuning forks, as they passed through the invisible biofield, revealed this whole terrain of texture and tone and rivers and walls. There was so much going on. And I remember thinking, if I could make this visible then it would prove that we have an energy field. And so that was my intention, was I wanted to create a device that would visualize the field, and maybe even a device that could like scan you, you know, kind of like a la Star Trek. They, you know, you'd stand in this tube and it would go boop, and it would scan you and it would figure out all the places where you're out of balance, and then it would go boop, and then you'd be like, think. And I thought that would be super cool. Or I'd have them in malls and stuff. I'm like, oh, time to go in for my alignment. And so I came to you, and she basically being like, how can we make this device? Like, let's make a device. And so your conservative team, I think it was Richard Hammerschlag, said, well, first we have to know if there's a there, right? Because Eileen, we could take your word for it and go build this expensive machine, and then there's like nothing going on. So we have to determine, like, is there something there, and is there something objective there? And so we did a study where we asked the question, will 3 different tuners find perturbations in the same place in the biofield on volunteers? And so we did this study where we set a tape measure down on the floor, and we we had 3 different skilled practitioners. Did we have 10 volunteers in that, Shamini? I think we did. And so we went out. Are we finding the edge in the same place? Are we finding these perturbations in the same place? And what we discovered was no. No, we're actually not finding that. And what that really showed me is that we exist in the space between each other. Like, Shamini, you bring out parts of me, because you and I can talk about the biofield, right? That other people don't, who can't talk about that, right? So really, we're a different person with every person that we interact. Different parts of our personality come to the fore. So when you're working in trauma, my body is going to show you certain types of trauma if you're resonant with it. Whereas another practitioner, that might not show up at all. So in trying to evaluate if there was some kind of objective pattern in the field that we could actually visualize, I realized that it's like trying to capture a fire. It's like it's going to be different in every moment. Observer theory, exactly. The observer affects the observed. And even just by me going in and like finding a perturbation, even though I wasn't adjusting it, I'm still affecting it. So the next person who comes behind me might not find that, right? So basically what we determined from that is there isn't this objective thing. It's always different, right? So, but I was still kind of thinking I wanted a machine, but then I went into an anechoic chamber in which is there's no sound. It was a Faraday cage, and we put a tuning fork on a swing arm in there. They're just trying to determine this sort of objective thing. And I think what came out of that for me, Shamini, and I didn't realize this right away, was that I stopped wanting to make a machine. Because I really realized that healing, especially this one-on-one healing that we're doing in a practice like biofield tuning, requires a human heart and a human mind, and care and compassion and support and love and lack of judgment. All of these things, like the human element is so important. And that's when I started becoming more interested in music. Right? So I think that was a very important study. Like, if you read the study, it looks like, oh, these people had this harebrained idea, they were going to find this, and then they didn't. Why did they even publish it? I'm like, no, we got so much out of that about the nature of the biofield, about the nature of human interactions, right? So that was study 1. That's been published in peer review. And then I just want to talk about another study too, Shamini, really briefly, was that ions are friend and colleague Helene Wabe, right? How do you pronounce her last name?
I believe that's right.
Wabe, that's a good name. She actually approached me. So she's the director of research at IONS. And she said, I was doing your 21-day series of the sonic slider, this tuning fork that you basically rub on yourself. Let me see if I've got one right here. Sonic slider. And I developed this practice where you rub it on yourself, and I had spent 3 hours once filming videos on how to rub it on yourself, and afterwards my bones felt so dense. I was like, oh my God, they're like lit up. I was glowing, right? I put all this energy into my bones, my piezoelectric bones, and so she came across that, and she's like, I wonder if the sonic slider actually does increase bone density. And so I was like, let's find out. So we did a study where, because we didn't know, right? We had no idea. So we had a number of volunteers, I'm not sure how many. Everybody did the sonic slider for 14 minutes a day for 42 days. Then they got bone density scans before, and they got bone density scans afterwards. And what we learned from that research was that doing the sonic slider for 14 minutes a day for 42 days does not increase bone density. Like, there was no indication that it had, right? So that kind of research showed us had the ability to show us something we didn't know, right? I mean, that's the beauty of technology in these bone scans. Like, well, let's ask the question. We don't know, so let's see. And what it showed us was, no, it doesn't. Now, if you use it, for longer than 42 days or more than 14 minutes a day, maybe it does, right? I don't know. So that's just, another kind of research. But then the one that we did on the anxiety study, the one that we want to present, and I want to shut up quickly so we can get to your data, Shamini. But basically what this study did was it showed us what we already knew from clinical practice. Like, I already knew that biofield tuning reduces anxiety. I knew that in every cell in my body because I've worked with thousands of people across decades. I've trained people have reported the same thing. We know that tuning reduces anxiety because we've had that experience. And so this research was seeking to capture that, something we already knew, and can we create it, can we put it into this box that makes it official so that we can actually capture that and share it with people. And I think that Shamini and she did a great job putting together this study, and the, the outcomes we see, it really speaks for itself. So on that, Shamini, let me pass it over to you and you can share more about it.
Thanks, Eileen. And I really appreciate you sharing, your motivations and the deep curiosity and excitement and the futuristic vision that you have for healing and what drew you first to think we're going to make a machine, and then kind of your own understanding of the role of compassion and connection in the healing process. And I'll just share from my perspective, as someone who identifies deeply with the healing process and as a clinical psychologist, sitting in this time and space, proving that energy is real, visualizing it. I mean, that's all very cool. I almost feel, though, at this juncture, it's almost self-indulgent to me. I'll say it. And it's okay. It's cool. There's going to be massive breakthroughs that we will have with people who are moving forward in that direction. It's a wonderful direction. And as a clinical person, what motivated me and the reason that I said, hey, Eileen, I think we should do this study on anxiety was it is very hard for me, and I think a lot of people here can resonate with this, including you. It's very hard to witness suffering that is occurring for no reason when we know we have solutions at hand. And this is what I love about the collaborative research that we do together, because first we sat and we talked, right? And I said, Eileen, what are you noticing in practice? By the way, the pandemic is happening right now, Eileen. I know you and your practitioners are not sitting on your hands, because we were talking about doing an in-person study with PTSD, then the pandemic happened. And I said, well, what are you guys doing right now? What are you noticing? And you said, well, we're doing biofield tuning at a distance. I said, well, tell me how you're doing that. And you said, well, we're meeting sometimes on Zoom or on the phone, and we're doing what we always do, Shamini. We're using the forks to tune into the field to, move stagnations, move tensions. And I said, are you seeing results? And you said, yeah, we are. And I said, well, Eileen, why don't we look at that? Because for you, what you're seeing is so vanilla, so basic. But for the rest of the world, it's not. And there are people right now that are in a shutdown mode. They can't access any kind of care. How are we going to help those folks? And could this help? So that was really our motivation for doing this study. And I'm going to share with y'all some slides. I'm really excited about this. And also just sort of couch this really briefly in how can we conduct research in healing in general, and alluding to some of what Eileen has been saying about the different approaches that we can take. So I'm going to share some slides here. For those of you who don't know about our nonprofit collaborative, welcome. You are on a Consciousness and Healing Initiative webinar right now. This is our 501c3 nonprofit collaborative. This is our collective vision that we know that we are all sitting with an untapped resource for healing that is the biofield. Our goal is to help everyone understand the nature and the reality of our subtle awareness, fields of energy and information that guide our healing process. This no longer needs to be a best kept secret. I just want to honor all of the broad-based leadership that comprise Chi. I think because sometimes it's my face you see on the webinars, you think it's Shamini. It's really not. There's so many folks. Our staff isn't even pictured here. Our wonderful staff that help make everything happen, including the study. We have a very thriving and active scientific advisory council as well as practitioner advisory council, wonderful board members. So just for a moment, I've been talking about this a lot, Eileen, and I think you'll relate to this. I've been talking about how we approach things in general in the world, but certainly our study of healing. And we've often used what we might call a SMART approach, which I liken to sort of the masculine approach to health and medicine and the study of it. And so what we tend to do is use the mind to sort of try to separate ourselves out. And of course, we know with the observer effect that that's not really accurate, but we try to study a thing out there. And we try to study healing almost like it's curing. So the SMART approach sort of tends to, we engage in sort of a sense of separation. We're looking for that magic bullet, that mechanism. We're actively seeking that thing. We tend to restrict our studies so that we're maximizing the effect by minimizing all the other variants and trying to find that one magic mechanism. And it's treatment focused. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the origin of the word treatment in Latin, it actually means to drag about, like literally to drag something out. You know, it really informs what we call the pathogenic model, right? This idea that healing is curing and I got to pull this anxiety out of me, for example, to heal. Okay, so that's kind of one way of thinking about it. And that's what bases, a lot of the research that is being conducted and the thinking behind it. But the other way is really informed by practice, right? And it's what we might call the heart approach. And both of these things have value. We need to bring them more together, but I would say we need to emphasize more of a heart approach here. And that is to recognizing that healing and the study of it is holistic in nature. It's an interconnected system. All of these things connect. Our spiritual life, our emotional life, our physical life, our energetic life are all part of an embedded system. And so the healing process is one of allowing. And in research, that means allowing for the phenomena, right? Creating the conditions where we're studying this more naturalistically, not trying to put healers in a little box and tell them what to do, but actually studying the way it's happening. And we recognize that this is relational, of course, it's all about the relationship. And that's not something we need to minimize for, but that we actually need to understand because it's such a huge part of the healing process. And finally, that it's therapy focused. And when you look at the word therapy, the origin of it actually means a service, a waiting on, right? So this approach is very different. And I would say we've really tried to integrate both the SMART and heart approach in the work. So this particular study that we're talking about was conducted in December of 2020 during the pandemic shutdown. We did wait until after the election to do this because it was a one group feasibility study. And so because in this study where we were just basically trying to figure out, can we study this? Can we study biofield tuning? Will people take distant biofield tuning sessions over Zoom? Will they fill out questionnaires and fill out the data? That's what this feasibility study was on. So we only had one group of 15 people. And what's interesting about this is that 40% of these people had never received any kind of energy therapy, any kind, Reiki, healing touch, sound healing. They were completely naive. We had 5 trained biofield tuning practitioners that we worked with. So it wasn't just studying Eileen, who, of course we know Eileen is a superstar, but we wanted to know, does this generalize to the typical biofield tuning practitioner? So we had several practitioners engage in this. And each person who we studied met criteria for generalized anxiety disorder. So if they would come into a doctor's office and filled out the questionnaire, which we used to screen them, they would have been told they had generalized anxiety disorder. And honestly, a lot of them would probably have been given medication. In our study, these people were not taking any medication, but we didn't restrict them from doing other things that they might have done for their anxiety. So they may have been seeing a therapist, they may have been doing other things, but none of them were on medications at the time, and all of them met criteria for anxiety. So what did we study? We used tried and true methods, including surveys of anxiety that we know tell us about the clinical relevance of anxiety, gold standard surveys that we know are reliable and valid in their measurement. And we also studied stress, positive and negative emotion, or positive and negative affect, as we call it, spiritual experiences using the network, or rather the non-dual experience thematic inventory, and a really wonderful measure called the self-assessment of change, which actually measures things like perceived energy and so forth. We also did something really interesting. We wanted to know in people's own language how things were going. And so one of the ways that we did this is collaborating with our colleagues at the University of Arizona, who do what is called linguistic word count. So we had people actually call into a Google phone every week during the study with a simple prompt: how was your day? And then they would just talk about how their day was. No other questions, no goading, no prompting, no asking them anything. Just how was your day? And then we analyzed that for their spoken language, because what we found is in studies is that people's own state of emotions can actually be captured by their language. And so we analyzed over the 3-week time, would their use of negative emotion language change? Would their use of positive emotion language change? And then we also interviewed people, because we did what's called a mixed method design, where we integrated quantitative, which is the survey and the language, with interviews to kind of understand what their experience was like in their own words, without prompting them in any way except to just ask very simple questions and then have them share what their overall experience was. So that's what we measured in this study. And what did we find? First of all, we found that it was feasible. People did do it. They did engage in receiving the healing practices. We had 2 people drop out before the study was done, which accounts for a 13% or so dropout rate, which is pretty standard, actually low for studies. Because as you can imagine, there's a lot involved, it's coordination. And the ones that dropped out basically said, it's an extraordinarily busy time, December, and I just am not able to make the time and space for it. So that's to be expected. And we did, I can talk more specifically and granular about the statistical analysis and all this. We used what's called a intention to treat analysis, which meant we actually put in the data from those people who dropped out and put them in the analysis as if they continued on, which is just a little bit more robust way of looking at it, a little more conservative, you would say, in looking at it. So what did we find? Probably not surprisingly to you all, we found significant, clinically significant, as well as statistically significant drops, massive drops, honestly, in anxiety within 3 weeks, which is pretty major for most behavioral interventions, right? Sometimes you don't see these effects, for example, with psychotherapy so quickly. We also saw decreases in stress and negative affect, also profound and statistically significant, as well as their self-assessment of change, how they felt they were doing, changes in energy in the body, and so forth. When we analyzed their language, we saw that their use of negative emotion language actually shifted over time. So they were using less negative emotion words in their own spoken words. And what's interesting is in this 3-week period of this feasibility study, we actually didn't see any statistically significant changes in positive emotion or even spiritual experiences, which we found very interesting. So there was a real specific effect on, if you want to call it, negativity or tension, right, where there was these resolutions. So here's some of the results in visual. Now, all of this is submitted to peer-reviewed scientific journals. We hope that we will be able to report on the publication in press, hopefully in a month or so, if we're lucky. Depends on how the review process goes and how long it takes. But these are all submitted to our peer-reviewed published journals. So here you're seeing the scores for anxiety, where people are coming in with, about, if I can't remember the exact mean, but it was about 52 or 53 on the state trait anxiety inventory state anxiety scale. And as you can see, they're dropping down to about 35. That is clinically significant. I believe that it really indicates that these particular people would have likely not met criteria for generalized anxiety disorder any longer after receiving 3 sessions of biofield tuning. We saw similar things for the anxiety measure, which measures so-called trait anxiety, which is more of a perception of the stability of your anxiety over a longer period of time. And interestingly, we saw the same trend with negative affect language. So the same kind of decrease over time in their use of negative emotion words. But now, what were they saying in their own words? And this is just a few. And again, we have a whole paper coming out with lots of different quotes from our patients or our participants of this study. But just a few that I want to point out, because we know that the biofield work can be quite extraordinary in terms of how it's happening. And yeah, we're not measuring the mechanism in the study, we're measuring the impact. And yet we see that in reports from multiple people, not just one person, that they're a little befuddled at what is actually happening. And they're saying, the interesting thing was she went, and she here is the participant is referring to the practitioner. She went to exact precise years of my life. What happened when you were 8? What happened 5 years ago? Well, 5 years ago, my dad died. How do you pick a year in a person's life that you never met and say what happened? Right? So these were experiences that people were having, and the way that we're capturing them is through people's own words. So no, we don't have a fancy machine that's showing all of the perturbations and things like that, but we do have people's reports that are reporting on these extraordinary experiences that they're having with the tuning, and almost a bewilderment of how could you possibly have known that, right? You can see the second one. I would never have believed that could happen over the air, almost hitting about almost the exact same age where I had an incident occur. It dug up a lot of stuff that I never expected people could get into. And you have to be willing to go with it and deal with it, which I think is key, Eileen. And that's what you talked about earlier in the hour, right? That this is part of the process. Just a few more quotes I want to share. There's so many wonderful ones, but one of the things that we noticed in general was that people's relationship with themselves changed. And that was really reflected in the way that they responded during the interviews. A lot of them felt a deeper connection with a more sense of calm. And it wasn't like they felt like their anxiety went away. It was just that they felt more even and more in their calmness in their core to be able to watch the flow of things happen rather than being caught up in the eddies of tension. And so we saw this over and over again. So it was really a tremendous study. I'm just so honored that we had the opportunity to work with the biofield tuners on the study and demonstrate these effects. And so what are the next steps? Now, I've been sitting with this for quite a while. You may have seen the stats that I showed earlier that during the pandemic, anxiety increased 4 or 5-fold to about 30% of the global population reporting significant levels of anxiety. Unfortunately, that hasn't really mitigated, even though this is over, the pandemic is over. We still have probably about a quarter of the population that suffers from, debilitating and clinically significant levels of anxiety worldwide. And what I'm noticing, Eileen, is that there are many people in our communities that are not being served for their anxiety. These are folks that often don't have access to care, not even potentially Medicare, and just don't necessarily have the resources at hand within the community to be able to provide healing solutions. And yet, many of the people in these communities come from Black, Indigenous, people of color communities that actually are rooted in healing traditions, that understand the biofield from their traditions, but aren't necessarily being offered holistic practices to bring them back to their spirit, right? So our goal with this next study is, of course, to expand this with a control group, as any good research group would do. That is important because we want to demonstrate that this is over and above just, chance and natural history effects and other things that could explain results. So we do need control and comparison groups. But more importantly, I'm very excited about our next directions because now we're really starting to take this out into the community. And Eileen, I want to honor and acknowledge the work that you've already been doing with Tuners Beyond Borders, where you have been, for example, training people, fellow citizens in Jamaica, for example, in biofield tuning through Tuners Without Borders. So you already know, and your practitioners who are with us know that this is highly trainable. This is very exciting to me. Because with this new study that we will be doing, which will be a randomized controlled trial, because we're going to be delivering biofield tuning to community members, if we actually demonstrate, which we suspect we will, that this is also effective for these groups who suffer from anxiety, but are coming from slightly different communities than we recruited for before, then we're in a fabulous position to be able to train people in the community to conduct biofield tuning. And so we have this opportunity to really scale up the sound healing work and the biofield work through the community care vehicle or vector. And that's really important because at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, we often talk about transforming suffering and increasing flourishing by bringing biofield care practices into transforming healthcare and transforming self-care. But we're also able to do it with these kinds of studies by transforming through community care and scaling up healing through communities. So we wanted to tell you about this because we're really excited about it. We're well on our way with our fundraising for this study, which is a major thrust of the research that the Consciousness and Healing Initiative will do for the next 3 years. It is going to take 3 years for us to conduct this study because we're not going to just study 15 people. We're aiming to study 100 people with the study. And so we wanted to let y'all know how you could actually help with this. The study costs $225,000 over 3 years. Research is very expensive. There's the good news. We have already raised $175,000 of that. So we are so well on our way. Our team is itching to get started, honestly. We want to start the study and begin the process in the beginning of the year in 2023 and conduct the work. And so we're offering a very special sort of give and receive gifts of gratitude, because part of fundraising for healing research, you guys, because the National Institutes of Health doesn't support this work yet, and other funding agencies, mainstream funding agencies still don't understand the biofield work, unfortunately, and we're aiming to do everything we can to change that. We do rely on people who get it to help support it. And we know that money is energy, and we are actually pretty particular about who we receive funds from, because we want the right energy behind this. And so we really want your energy behind it. And we want you to help us complete our fundraising goal. And there's some really fun ways you can do this. All amounts are welcome. All amounts are meaningful because it is your love that you're bringing to this project and to our fellow brothers and sisters who need support for mental health. But there are gifts that we're going to give you as part of your contributions to our 501c3 nonprofit. So everything that you provide to us is tax deductible because we are a 501c3 not-for-profit here in the United States. With a $50 level, you get to up-level your wellness by special tunings that Eileen will provide, as well as a sound-based healing grounding meditation that I will provide to you. If you donate at the 108 level, you will automatically become a Chi contributor, which allows you to access this and over 50 or 60 hours of beautiful discussions with our healing leaders, including folks like Eileen, Donna Eden, Rosalind Bruyere, Deepak Chopra, Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Cindy Dale, the list goes on and on. So you have access to all of that goodness with that donation. If you are able to donate at the $500 level, we have a very, very special gift for you, which is our Science of Healing course. I cannot tell you how much incredible feedback and testimonials we have been getting from this course, which include over 35 guest faculty, really covering in deep detail the science of healing in a really, really beautiful journey. So well worth the value of your $500 tax-deductible contribution, and a great gift as well. And finally, and this is very limited, I'm going to just preface this. Eileen and I are both going to offer for any of you who are able to and excited to donate at the $1,000 level. We'll only be able to offer a few of these, so it is sort of first come, first serve. You will receive a personal healing session, and you can choose whether to receive that with Eileen or me. It is very limited, so if you are interested in that, I highly recommend that you donate sooner than later. And I just want to thank you all for being with us, first of all, and listening to some of the exciting work that is coming out of our collaborative. And thank you for your kind support and your listening through this. And Eileen, anything that you would like to add? And I think Jason will probably put the link to in the chat for those of you who want to connect in that way. And I just want to say, this is a very reachable goal. I mean, if we've only got from 225, which is what we initially had to raise, we only have 50 left. And honestly, that means that if 100 of you decided to donate $500 and receive the 8-week Science of Healing course, which is a $697 value, we're done, right? Or if 1,000 of you, because there are more than 1,000 of you registered for this webinar right now, actually donated at the $50 level, we're done. So again, all amounts are welcome. We're so excited to continue this work.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for all that, Shamini. Thanks for the slideshow and for the fundraising thing. You know, somehow we've managed to fund everything we've done so far. The money has come. We've certainly relied on our community. And like Shamini said, we're not, you know, the biofield, we're still kind of Wild West here. So we're not getting money from NIH yet. So we really do need your support. This is definitely a community effort. You know, and like Shamini said, I think what she and I both really feel is that it's so important for us to bring relief from suffering from the populations that really need it. You know, the ones who need it the most are the ones who can least afford it. And, you know, the part of the reason why we're healers, because we care about that. And so the more valid studies we have, the more we're going to be able to get into these places where they're just giving out drugs, you know, and to the parts of the population. And as we work in those parts of the population where the need is the greatest, it affects all of us. You know, it really does. So this is important for a lot of different reasons, and we absolutely appreciate your support. Thank you. So Shamini, it's 3 o'clock, but we have lots of questions. Do we want to stay on for 10 more minutes?
Eileen, if you're okay with it, I would love to honor everyone and just jump into a few questions. Now, there are several dozen questions, you guys. I don't know if you can see everybody else's question. I will try to pick the ones that I think are the most, you know, the ones that everyone is kind of asking, just to honor everyone here. And so we'll just jump in here. So, here's a great question, and kind of a nuanced question here, Eileen, which I think you might be interested in answering. Just thinking of the connection between anxiety and depression, and also the connection of depression to the gut-brain connection, the potential of inflammation being behind these. Curious how this showed up in the research. And we can answer that. We didn't look at that. And then a thank you for the research. And this person is a biofield tuner. So, you know, very pleased to know that we're doing this study. But any reflections, Eileen, on what you want to say about gut brain, anxiety, and depression from your perspective?
Yeah, you know, what I've really learned to do with tuning is to stop looking at things chemically and really look at everything rhythmically, tonally, with regards to flow, signal to noise ratio, how much resistance in the electrical signal. So gut brain health, so much of, you know, we are a symphony of so many different types of microorganisms live within us and comprise, you know, the human family within. And I've discovered that things like gut balance or imbalance is very tonal. Like, for example, Candida loves the tonal valley of depression. When people are depressed, that's what you hear in the tuning forks in their signal. Very often, that depression often has a sugar addiction component in it. So, you know, one definition is that depression is anger turned inwards. It's the inner fire being suppressed by sugar and feeling bad. And then the candida just blows up in that environment. It's jam, sugar. Like, yeah, we're having a party here in this body. Right? You can't get rid of any of these things. They just have to find their right balance. And if you start looking at the balance as tonal, like if you are a pipe organ, you know, are all of your pipes playing? Do you have some pipes that are shut down, that are rusted? Are there certain tones you're not making? Are there certain stupid tones you're just making over and over and over again? It's going to make the whole gut brain, it's just going to be, you're just going to be an instrument that's like, right? So the more in tune you become, the more relaxed, the more in tune, the gut brain thing just fixes itself. Like you don't even need supplements for the most part. Like it just adjusts itself. It's tonal, it's rhythmic. It's so much easier to fix problems on that level than trying this supplement or trying that supplement while you're still walking around going, you know what I mean? It's like, is your instrument in tune? What do you need to do to get your instrument in tune? There's plenty of things besides biofield tuning that will help to get you in tune. And the first step is just noticing where you are out of tune and what kind of notes you keep playing. playing, and know that any kind of out of balanceness is going to show up in the microflora in your environment. The solution is not particles, it's changing the waves.
Changing the way. Then that maybe relates to some of the questions that people have, Eileen, about the adjustment process, maybe when receiving a tuning. So we have questions here about people who experience a lot of yawning and nausea, for example. One person reporting they were, experiencing these types of things even during our tuning today. That, any insights that you have onto these types of things like yawning and nausea when you're receiving the sound.
Sure, it's just release. That's all that it is. It's some kind of pattern of tension that's held. Remember I said the lot is in the jaw and in the neck, and so yawning is just the body. It's just the body spontaneously releasing that tension. Like you might even get like really big yawns. You're like, oh my God, it's such a big yawn. And that's just a release of tension. And nausea, it can definitely be one of them. I mean, I've had moments where I've worked on people, they're on the table and all of a sudden they're like, I gotta go to the bathroom. And they go and throw up and come back, because they've been holding so much and now it's starting to release and the body wants to purge it. I talk about how people can have interesting bathroom experiences the day after tuning, and they're like, whoa, what's coming out of me? Because you just let go of some kind of tension, that's holding in cell poop and stopping your body from like keeping itself clean.
Wow, fascinating. That's fascinating. So we have a lot of questions about uses of specific frequencies for specific ailments. I mean, too many to mention because there's so many things that folks are talking about. But this particular question from Archana, I think, is also relevant and speaks to that, as well as just generally exploring the world of sound healing. And she says she's wondering what the difference would be between using a specific frequency using a tuning fork versus a Tibetan singing bowl that has multiple frequencies. And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, a tuning fork doesn't have just one frequency. A tuning fork technically produces an infinite number of overtones and undertones. And I use aluminum-based ones, which are specifically designed to create all of those overtones. Stainless steel forks are better for tuning instruments because they don't produce overtones. So the kind of therapeutic tuning forks we're using are like bowls in that they're creating multiple frequencies. When we're using tuning forks in person with somebody or even at a distance, we're using them very precisely as we go through the biofield. It's like dropping a needle on an album and reading the vibrational record of someone's life. Biofield tuning practitioners work with the biofield anatomy map. So wherever they encounter distortion, resistance, stuckness, it's a very specific memory that they can plot on the map and share with you. Then they're going to hang out in that spot of resistance and distortion, staying there, reflecting that particular area back to the system as a whole. The system as a whole will use that coherent input in that specific location to relax because it wants to hear itself in tune. So biofield tuning and the practice with tuning forks working through the field is very specific. It's very specific. Whereas if you're just hanging out with bowls, you're getting those waves washing through you. They're interrupting the patterns of tension that can definitely help you to relax in the moment. But if you want to tease out specific self-limiting beliefs that you formed when you were 4, if you want to tease out specific birth trauma that you can't remember, if you want to tease out a very specific tendency to always be putting your mind into the future and what you have to go and do because it's messing up your right hip, right? Tuning forks adjust the field, adjust these very specific things. So they're more specific and more precise. And more effective, I think, ultimately as a concept. That's just my bias.
And here's the thing, you guys. There are almost no studies done with even Tibetan sound bowls. I mean, I'm aware of a wonderful study that was conducted by our colleague Tamara Goldsby at UCSD, a very small study again, too. But there's almost no studies in this. So empirically speaking, we still don't even have answers in terms of the effects. But my suggestion and my thought is there's probably going to be more similarities than we realize. But like Eileen, you said, as we get more nuanced into the research, the specificity of what you're talking about, I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface. There's a wonderful question here about, have we been considering, is there any research looking at autonomic balance? I mean, what a wonderful question. A no-brainer for us to look in that direction. And Eileen and I have been talking about whether it's feasible for us to incorporate heart rate variability in analysis into this, both just looking at the receiver, but also between the healer and healee. It's nuanced. Again, it's very expensive. We want to do it, but we want to do it well. So sometimes in research, we have to be a little bit patient to say, we want to do something, we want to do it really well, we want to make sure we capture the outcomes, we want to make sure it's feasible before we start telling people in these underserved communities, now you've got to use an electrode and put it on here, and we're going to, it just adds a layer of complexity. We do want to do that research, absolutely. So the short answer is no. No one has looked at this yet. There's so much for us to explore in this. It's just amazing. There's a wonderful question here about essentially just a question about, with these kinds of studies, Eileen, is everyone doing the same thing? Like, is there a standardized protocol that you would speak to that people are doing? That people would want to kind of know, how do you go about doing research like this? Are they all doing the same thing? Oh, I'm
There's
losing.
some kind of static building up when my mic stays on. So anyway, yes, there's a standard biofield tuning approach that is, in the manual that you learn, like this is how you do a standard session. And everybody did that. Everybody did the exact same thing, which is you open up the central channel of the torus that is the electrical system. You get it flowing nice and clear. Then you use a pendulum to determine what area you're going to work in, what zone of the biofield anatomy. You let their organizing intelligence tell you where to work. And then you do what's called a biofield adjustment, where you start at the outer edge of the field and you comb your way through, you come to the center, you integrate that energy, and then you focus it by going out the front of the body. And so that's it. Each session is usually just one adjustment, sometimes two. So everybody receives the exact same treatment. Now you're muted, Shamini.
In case the static was coming from me, I thought I would just mute, because that happens to me on occasion too. When we get very excited, we amplify static of the Zoom channel. So a wonderful question here. How can I donate? Jason has put this in the chat, and I'm just putting it back again in the chat here. There's a link there that you'll see. It's called chi.is/support-research. And I'm going to invite you all, because if you have not, if I want to make sure that you know how amazing this course is, as the thank you that you'll get to if you go to scienceofhealingcourse.com, you'll get a sense of the offering for that $500 level. It's, again, we believe in the reciprocity of energy, and your kind support is so appreciated. And we want to make sure that you continue to be resourced as you continue to resource others. So we're so pleased to be able to share that with you. Please do dig in. And for those of you who are new to the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, just dig in. We have a lot of really great resources for you. And gosh, we're wishing you incredible resource and joy and light, resonance and coherence during this holiday season. Coming toward the end of the year, this is our last webinar for 2022. 2023 is going to be a huge adventure. It's going to be a great adventure, and I'm just so pleased that we're all embarking on the adventure together. And Eileen, thank you so much for sharing your light, your wisdom, your practice, your enthusiasm for continuing to scale healing for communities. Any last things that you would like to share before we part?
Well, I want to thank you, Shamini. Back in the day when I was writing my master's thesis, I was at Northern Vermont University, and I was searching human energy field and aura in PubMed and Medline, trying to find some peer-reviewed literature on this topic for my literature review, and I was not finding anything. And I was like, what am I doing trying to write an academic treatise on this topic? Like, I didn't know. I thought I was going to go underwater. And then I came across the term biofield in Gary Schwartz's book, The Energy Healing Experiments. And I started searching biofield, and I found papers by you and by my good friend Paul Mills. And that made all the difference. I'm so grateful that you and my other colleagues at Beverly Rubik were already out there doing this work. Gave me so much of a foundation to latch onto and a context for what I was encountering. And I'm so grateful that we've all become colleagues and that we're all working to move this field of study forward. So thank you, and everything that you do with Chi. And thanks everybody for showing up and being curious about this and for your support. We really appreciate it.
Yes, thank all of you for being part of the healing change in the healing community. It is a joy to be able to facilitate these kinds of gatherings. So wishing you all the best and a big thanks to everyone who has joined us today. Wishing you well, and if we don't see you before, Happy New Year.
Take care, everybody.